Well, joining us is Johanna Leblanc, U.S. National Security Law and Foreign Policy expert. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Vuyo, and thank you so much for having me on.
Well, appreciate it. See there, the Obamas were on fire, mocking Trump, saying Kamala can't, but can she?
I think it's certainly Vice President Harris's race to lose. As you see at the Democratic National Convention, there's a great deal of energy and excitement by the Democratic Party. And you saw former President Barack Obama took the stage and really energized the party. And I think before Mr. Biden had indicated that he was not going to seek re-election, I don't think that momentum, that excitement was necessarily there. And I think most Americans felt as though Mr. Trump was going to win the election. But I think things have changed, and I think that it has become more of a competitive race. And yes, the Democratic Convention is very energized, great speakers. But the reality is that, Vuyo, the average American does not watch the Democratic Convention. They just don't. What's going to matter at the end of the day is that the Democratic Party will have to knock on every door. They cannot take any voter for granted in America. And what's also interesting is that you see different groups are supporting Harris. You see white men for Harris. You see African-American women for Harris. You see black men for Harris. You see LGBTQI+ for Harris. So there's a great deal of excitement and mobilization to see that Vice President Harris wins the presidency.
Why don't a lot of Americans watch the Democratic National Convention?
The reality is that most Americans are not really interested in those nuances, right? They're not interested in the primaries, right? They're just focused more on the day of the election, which is November 4th. That's just the reality. People have to go to work, and the mainstream media does not cover the entire convention for the entire day. They focus on specific highlights and also towards the end of the night when many Americans are sleeping. But it's those of us who are nerds, political nerds, who are really engaged and involved. At the end of the day, the Democratic Party, if they wish to win this election, must knock on every door because there are real issues impacting the American public.
Is that also true for the Republicans?
Absolutely. It is very true for the Republicans. But the difference is that with Donald Trump is his voters are committed to him. We saw after he was convicted in the state of New York in the hush money case, his campaign website crashed in campaign donations. So his voters, they're already committed to him. There's not much that he can do to change their mind. Whereas with Vice President Harris, she's still relatively unknown to the American public, even though she is the Vice President of the United States of America. But we all know that the role of the Vice President is to support the President of the country, not to overshadow the President. And also, she was a former senator. There are a total of 535 members of Congress. Most Americans don't know who they are. Most of them are very unpopular, unlike your AOCs of the party, and now a new rising star within the Democratic Party, Jasmine Crockett.
But then there is a sense among many people that the Republican support for Trump is nothing but it's fanatical, you know. And with that often comes the attitude that suggests you shouldn't really bother that much about him, and that's wrong, isn't it?
I think it's wrong. I don't think that Mr. Trump should be taken for granted because the reality is that people vote for Trump for different reasons. People vote for Trump for purely economic reasons. People vote for Trump because they think that there was a more peaceful world under his presidency. People vote for Trump because of his personality. They think he's relatable. So I don't think that Mr. Trump should be taken for granted in spite of all of the challenges, the convictions, and all of the different court cases. And let's not forget that there are people who are going to vote for Mr. Trump because they sympathize with him. We saw that he just escaped an assassination attempt recently, and to some of the American people, they look at it as though here is a man who's really trying to change America, but is faced with obstacles by the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is utilizing the court system as a way to beat him and to challenge him during the election.
Now, Kamala Harris, has surged from Joe Biden's position from during the time Biden pulled out, right? And since then, she has continued to break a lot of matrix. But has she done enough? Is she now in a position where people can say they are toe-to-toe necessarily?
Like I said earlier, Vuyo, I think that the race has certainly become more competitive. I think initially all of us really did believe that Trump was going to win. But with the supporters of many governors, about a dozen governors across America have endorsed Kamala Harris. And that means something, because it's not just the Vice President Harris who's going to be knocking on doors and trying to secure votes. It's those governors that already have the hearts and the minds of their constituents that are going to convince those voters in states across America, look, vote for Harris. She is the better candidate. She's the candidate that's going to ensure that all Americans can reach the American dream, not just some Americans, but all Americans. She's the candidate that's going to ensure that our economy is more stronger. She's the candidate that's going to ensure that we have better relations with the African continent and with our allies and our partners all across the world.
Now, apart from Democrats having to knock at those doors if they are to beat Donald Trump and winning those battleground states, what else do they still have to do specifically, like to really, in other words, what that would be in Harris, that would work to Harris's advantage. What else? What other lever do they still have to pull to make it happen?
It's a great question you ask, actually. We see the conflict between Israel and in Palestine. For the very first time in American politics since the Vietnam War, U.S. foreign policy is going to have an impact on the election in America. You have your uncommitted voters in states like Michigan who have said, Vice President Harris, we want arms embargo. We want you to call for a ceasefire. And absent of those things, we're not going to vote. And they're not going to necessarily vote for a Trump presidency, right? But not voting for Harris means that it's a win for Trump, because that's what happened in 2016. People were not satisfied with candidate Hillary Clinton, so they stayed home. And as a result, you had a Trump who wins the presidency. And even though Clinton won the popular vote, but the 270 Trump won it. So there's a foreign policy issue that is at the center of American politics currently, which is not the norm for American politics, because the average American really cares about the cost of gas, the cost of higher education, whether or not they can take a vacation at the end of the year. But foreign policy is certainly going to play a role in this election. But
what are the chances, though, of a Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump scenario playing itself all over again in this instance as well?
It's possible. You know, politics is one that is that it sometimes can be unpredictable. And in spite of the momentum that exists today, I think we will be able to have a better assessment as to where Vice President Harris currently sits and stands after the DNC convention. Will the momentum still exist? Will people still be mobilized and energized? But at the end of the day, you could get folks to be energized and to get excited, but are they going to vote for you on November 4th? That's what really matters.
Johanna Leblanc, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on.